Hi and welcome to this video in which I'm building the brand new de Havilland Vampire in 1/48 scale from Airfix. If you enjoy this video and find it useful, please remember to click the like button below. You might want to subscribe to the channel as well to see other builds and new projects. There's even a link there where you can buy me a cup of coffee if you like. Anyway, on with the kit. Now this kit is listed at skill level 2. So it's achievable by anyone with a bit of patience and concentration. You also get 2 flying hours, which, if you're an Airfix club member, you can save towards a free kit in the future. More details are in a video on my channel. The box art looks exciting. Let's open it up and see if the kit is too. So there are 4 sprues of grey plastic on here. There's the top of the fuselage, air intakes and the fuselage structural members there. There's fuel tanks, other bits of bodywork. Air intakes, interestingly, there's 1 extended air intake, probably for a later mark, for a later kit release, obviously. Nose, seat and so on. Doors, engine parts, pilot, of course, being an Airfix kit, wheels, and cockpit parts, and then the last one, the bottom of the fuselage and the booms that go to the tailplane. There's also a sprue of clear plastic, relatively small, which is the 2-piece canopy, windshield and canopy itself. You can have open or closed, gun sight, navigation lights and an identification light underneath. So 4 sprues, not that many pieces, but they all look very nice, no flash, well modelled, nice and sharp. It's a fresh kit. So the instructions, as usual with Airfix these days, very clean, very comprehensive, nicely drawn. There's not much in the way of options. I guess you can decide whether or not to have the undercarriage up or down, and you can have the flaps up or down on this as well, which is really nice. There's plenty of detail in the flap bays and wheel bays, so lots to get our teeth into later on, but nicely drawn set of instructions as usual. Okay, so the decals, you have quite a collection here. They're very smart, very well printed, very clean. There's no colour bleeding, there's no smudging. They're very well produced cartograph decals as usual, even to the point of making sure that the Norwegian colour of the blue here in the roundel is different from the RAF and RCAF colours. Then lastly we have the colour sheets and the decal positioning sheets. So as usual, really nice. I really like these. Very large, very clear, well drawn, well identified places. I like these a lot. So this one's the 601 Royal Auxiliary Air Force. And finally, these sheets telling you where all the decals go and the colouring goes. Not much in the way of colouring on this, as everything seems to be high-speed silver. So it's all about decals really. So this is the first set here. 601 Royal Auxiliary Air Force. I love these drawings. They're so clear and so helpful. In the past, some of them have been really pretty atrocious. This is the aircraft I'm building from 442 City of Vancouver Auxiliary Fighter Squadron of the Royal Canadian Air Force. Mainly because I love all this extra red. It works so nicely with the high-speed silver. And I have family in Canada, so kind of all sits together. And then lastly is the Vampire F3 in the Gardermoen Museum in Oslo. This is the aircraft, of course, that Airfix 3D scanned in order to create this kit. So very important aircraft, just not for me to build. I'm sticking with the Canadian one. So we'll have a closer look at some of the bits and pieces and get on with the kit. As normal, the first thing I'll do is give the plastic parts a wash in a gentle detergent to get rid of any residues from the moulding process. When these have dried, I also give them a light coat of grey primer. The first thing to do is drill some 2mm holes in the wings for the fuel tanks. I'm using a small wooden block here to support the wing and prevent any bending on the sprue. I also have to drill a 1mm hole for what I think is an IFF antenna, more of which later. The next thing to do is give the interior of the air intakes a coat of aluminium. Now, I'm not entirely sure how much of this will be visible, so there's no need to be too picky, I think. There are a lot of these little nubs to remove, so use your side cutters to get rid of them. Now I'm sanding these off as well, not that they're going to be seen when the part's installed in the wing and body, but to help them join cleanly together. The only bit that may need some filling later on is this inside seam on the outer part of the intake, but even that might not be noticeable in the finished kit. One for the competition builder perhaps. The intake sits on a spar which has fan blades printed into it. Again, not sure if they'll ever be seen again. Then the spar fits into the lower fuselage and wing half. The ends form part of the undercarriage wells. These parts complete the structure of the main wheel wells. Now, I've pre-painted them, but you really could do this later. The next item is the exhaust pipe with gunmetal painted on the inside. Again, this comes in two halves. Onto this rear spar element goes an exhaust cone for the engine, then the exhaust pipe fits over this. Note there's a definite downward tilt to this, don't sand it out. Then this whole rear assembly simply sits in the lower half of the fuselage. Onto the cockpit next, and the first thing I'll do is prep the instrument panels in black, and I'll add the decals. Now these are very well printed and stand out beautifully. Next I'm attaching a fire extinguisher to the rear bulkhead of the cockpit. The instructions say this should be black, but I'm going to use this brass colour. Then I can fit the seat to the cockpit floor. Now you'll notice the seat belts here. There are two seats provided, a plain one if you're including a pilot, and this one with the straps if you're not having a pilot. The rear bulkhead can then be joined to the cockpit floor. The two side instrument panels are a bit fiddly to say the least, but we get there with a bit of patience. I think they might have been better fitted into the upper fuselage half along with the centre panel. Anyway, after that I can add the control column. While the cockpit assembly is drying, I can build the walls of the nose wheel bay. These come in two halves. With those set in place, the cockpit assembly slides into the lower fuselage half at the front. Now it may take a bit of jiggling and dry fitting. This is then followed by the top of the nose wheel well. The next thing I'm adding are these fillets inside the flap bays. Now other than the fact they've got holes in them, I'm really not sure why these aren't just moulded into the fuselage. And while I've got a moment, I'll also assemble the tail booms to give them a chance to set before being installed. The cockpit interior has a few extra details such as this trim wheel, which I assemble on the sprue, paint black and fit into the upper half of the fuselage. I'll also place the main instrument panel at this point. When the tail booms have set, they can be slid into place in the lower half of the wing. Now there's a notch at the bottom of the rear spar for them to fit into. I'm going to set the tail plane as well now. This will then be ready to stabilise the booms when they're in their final place. The last thing that goes in before joining the fuselage and wing halves is this IFF antenna. Now, I think this is a bad bit of design. My first thought was, that will get broken. Sure enough, it broke about 5 minutes later. You're handling the kit and there's this spindly bit of plastic sticking out the bottom. I think it would have been much better to design one that could be fit into the lower part of the wing toward the end of the build. Anyway, with all these done, the two halves of the fuselage can go together. The fit, especially around the front, will take a little bit of fiddling, but it does all go together. The booms can now be set with the tailplane to brace them and hold them in the right place. Now note the use of tape and clamps everywhere, holding things together. Now the elevator piece, as it came off the sprue, looked quite bent to me. In fact, it does seem to have a very slight curve, but nothing as strong as this. Once straightened out, it fits into the rear of the tailplane. The rudders can go on at this point too. With all the fuselage parts setting up, I'll turn my attention to the fuel tanks. These come in 3 parts, 2 upper quarters and a lower half. I suspect these will need a little bit of filling and sanding later on to make them look seamless. I'm going to add the intake fillets now, and as you can see, there is one here that's longer than the other 2. Now I've subsequently discovered that the FB9 Mark has one extended intake fillet to accommodate an air cooling unit for the cockpit in tropical climates, so expect to see an FB9 tooling before too long. Anyway, they slot into place fairly well. Next up are these curved wingtips. The later Marks, such as the FB9, had squared off wingtips. Again, another suggestion of a later kit variant. I've fitted the gun sight, masked the windscreen and canopy and placed them all on top. Now I always use a PVA glue for this to prevent chemical hazing on the plastic. Back to the wings now, and I'm fitting these ends of the wing formers that are visible inside the flap wells. Now after that I'm going to spray the whole aircraft in aluminium. With the main paint drying, I'm going to get onto these flaps and attach some actuators. There's also this small bottle that I'm painting copper. I'm really not happy with the colour, so I've added a touch of silver just to brighten it a bit. And with the fuel tanks sanded and painted, I can add them to the wings. The next job is to assemble the undercarriage. Now, with the wheel, there's a shaped hole that fits onto the leg only in one place, and that makes sure the flat spot of the weighting on the tyre is on the bottom. And I can also add the undercarriage doors to the legs at this point. The nose wheel fits into one half of the yoke on the bottom of the leg, then the other half of the yoke goes on top to hold the wheel in position. Back to the fuselage, and the outer undercarriage doors can be set in place, and they're held in place by this collection of actuator legs. The 4 pieces of the flaps slide into place at the back of the wings, held at the correct angle by pegs. And once the main gear has set up, it can slot into place under the wings. The ailerons go on next. Note that I've already painted the outer panels of the wings in red. The ailerons stay completely aluminium. I found the marking around the nose tricky to mask properly, so I painted it red and applied the graphic decal, and then I was able to follow the line of the decal by hand in aluminium. Onto the nose gear, and you assemble one piece to the front door and then attach the nose leg to this. Once these are in the right place, I can fit the entire nose gear assembly into the wheel well. After that, the rear door goes into place, and both the door and the nose wheel get extra bracing parts. Next on are the air brakes on the rear of the wings near the fuel tanks. And while I remember, I can give the tailpipe a touch of gunmetal on the outside at this point. The last few pieces now, and these mass balances go on the underside of the elevator. The pitot goes into position at the top of the port fin, and then the previously broken IFF aerial goes into place underneath the starboard wing. Finally, I'm adding the wing navigation light covers, again using PVA glue. So that's really it. The decals go on and I add a bit of panel wash. This is a very attractive kit of a lovely aeroplane with only a few things I would change. The nose art is difficult to fit with the gun ports without loads of decal solvent, and the IFF aerial is just daft. Other than that, an enjoyable kit and a good addition to the Airfix range. Now if you've enjoyed this video, found it useful, please do remember to click like it below, and do make sure to subscribe to my channel to see previous builds, new projects and other videos. Thanks very much for watching. I'll see you next time.